Well, welcome to the 700 Club. The war against Israel and the Jewish people extends far beyond the Middle East. Hezbollah terrorists are plotting attacks against Jewish communities in South America.
Iran is also undercutting diplomatic support for the Jewish state in the region. 4 nations have removed or recalled their ambassadors to Israel. Dale Hurd reports on Iran's growing dominance right in our own backyard.
Brazilian police foiled a terror attack last week against Jewish targets after a tip from Israel's spy agency Mossad. 2 members of Hezbollah were arrested. This in a region that saw horrific bombings in 1992 and 1994, both the work of Hezbollah and Iran. During a time of war in the Middle East, the growing influence of Iran and Hezbollah in Latin America creates not only a renewed strategic threat to the United States, but a fresh danger to Latin America's Jewish community. Dr. Evan Ellis is a Latin American specialist at the U.S. Army War College.
If what is happening in the Middle East right now, heats up into a hot war between the United States and Iran, one can expect that Iran will seek to mobilize its proxy networks, Hezbollah and others throughout the hemisphere. And so it's not unthinkable, numerous attacks that could be undertaken against, against both Israeli and Jewish community targets and U.S. targets.
Iran's influence can be seen behind the decisions of 4 Latin American nations to remove or recall their ambassadors from Israel after it attacked Hamas in Gaza. Chile, Bolivia, Honduras, and Colombia. The Bolivian government said it will cut diplomatic ties with Israel. Iran has been forging military and business alliances with dictators and corrupt leaders in Latin America for decades, most famously with Venezuela, which is helping Iran build drones and hosting camps for Hezbollah fighters and members of Iran's Quds force. Latin Americans are also getting a steady diet of anti-U.S. programming through Iran's Hispan TV, which blankets the region. Earlier this year, Brazil's socialist government ignored U.S. protests and allowed Iran to dock 2 warships in Rio de Janeiro. In Buenos Aires, Dr. Ariel Gelblung with the Simon Wiesenthal Center says the fact that Iranian and Hezbollah agents are operating freely in Latin America has Jews in the region on alert.
We are all worried here in Argentina and in all Latin America about this. If they can't attack in southern Lebanon to Israel, they will try in another place. Their worries, of course, to protect the Jewish community in this country.
Latin America has become a win-win situation for Iran as it builds profitable alliances for itself while helping strengthen governments that are hostile to the United States and to Israel. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Ellie Kohanim joins us now from Washington, D.C. She's the former U.S. envoy to combat anti-Semitism and a CBN News contributor. So how is Iran able to make inroads and make common cause with South American nations? It just seems amazing to me.
Gordon, first of all, it's wonderful to be with you, a real honor. And it is shocking to understand the Islamic Republic's penetration of South America, Latin America, right on our doorsteps here. The Iranians have had a long-term presence through their terror proxy, Hezbollah, which operates in Latin America and in drugs and weapons, shady dealings for many years now. The other thing that the Islamic Republic has done successfully is they've spent billions of dollars on Spanish language media, so radio and television programs that are broadcast into South America. And so all of this combined has had tremendous influence. You also just mentioned the Iranian relationship with Venezuela. So there's been penetration into Venezuela. There's even reports of Iranian boots on the ground in Venezuela. It's definitely something that all Americans should be concerned about.
I don't understand on the ideology why socialist leftists in Latin America would find common cause with a Islamic Revolutionary Republic. It just doesn't seem to make any sense. If the Islamists were ever to take over, the first thing they would do would be eliminate the leftists. So I don't understand the common cause.
It doesn't make sense. There is this red-green alliance of leftists and Islamic radicalists all over the world. I mean, we're seeing it in Europe, and unfortunately, we're seeing it right here at home in the United States, where I believe if the left on its own is, a small minority, and the radical Islamists are a small minority, but when they join together, they become a more powerful bloc. And that is the only logical conclusion one can imagine why these two disparate groups would get together. Because as you pointed out, they have no values in common. We all know that, as an example, in the Middle East, people who identify as homosexual are hanged from the center of town from cranes routinely. They're thrown off roofs. And yet in the United States and in Western cities and in Latin America, we're seeing people who say that they support LGBTQ causes aligning with radical Islamists. So it's just a power play. It makes no sense otherwise.
Well, some here are arguing the U.S. should limit support to Israel, focus on our own U.S. security. What does Iran's involvement in South America tell us about that strategy?
The Islamic Republic, since 1979, grabbing power in Iran, have been very clear in their aspirations of gaining hegemony, not just through the Middle East, North Africa, but again, their radical Islamist theology and ideologies that they would really like to take over the world. And while that seems so strange to us to imagine that there are people who actually have an ideology that wishes to, conquer the entire world, that is their aspiration. They tell us this routinely. And so I believe the Islamic Republic understands perhaps that the U.S. is not paying as much attention as we should be to what's going on just south of us. And this is, a weak and vulnerable spot that they found a way to penetrate, again, Latin America, and they've done it successfully now for years. So it behooves our U.S. policymakers, it behooves Washington to take this Iranian threat seriously, to understand that they're right at our doorstep, and it really behooves our president and the Biden administration to take every step they can to contain Iran, not just in the Middle East, where we're on the verge of a very dangerous situation for all of us, but also in Latin America, right on our own doorstep.
Well, let's turn to the anti-Semitism that's now, it's amazingly evident on U.S. college campuses. It's evident to such a degree that I'm frankly stunned. It seems like there's a coordinated strategy between the attacks in October, then the Israeli counter war, and now suddenly there's this propaganda machine that's geared up, that's producing people in marches and banners and all of that. So tell us, where are they getting their funding?
Gordon, I also want to just reflect back what you just said, which is that on October 7th, Hamas committed atrocities against the Jewish people in Israel. And we started to see footage of this, released to the U.S. We started to see the footage that Hamas themselves took of the atrocities they committed. And immediately afterwards, there were pro-Hamas rallies taking place on our U.S. campuses. It's just hard for us, I think, to fathom that these kids on our campuses were supporting Hamas even before Israel took any military retaliation, even before Israel had a chance to bury their dead. It's a warped sense of values that we're seeing across our campuses. And to the question of where is the funding and support coming for organizations like Students for Justice in Palestine, there's organizations like NGO Monitor and others that have been studying their finances, and what they found is that there's this very opaque web. Believe it or not, Students for Justice in Palestine does not have 501c3 status, which makes it much harder for us to track their financing. But there is a dark web of financing that NGO Monitor and others have discovered, and what they have found is that there's millions of dollars essentially coming through the Middle East, through countries like Qatar and others, not only to the student organizations, but also to our universities ourselves. And this week, the journalist Barry Weiss also did an expose on this foreign funding that our universities are illegally not reporting to the U.S. government. So this is a whole other project that our U.S. government needs to take on, forcing the universities to reveal their foreign funding sources so that we can get to the bottom of who's indoctrinating our children.
Well, every time I see a Center for Islamic Studies being established at a university, you peel it back, and usually you see like $50 million and up being donated to that university in order to establish it. And for decades, that funding came out of Saudi Arabia. It just seems to be this incredible tangle, whether it's the Muslim Brotherhood or amazing to me, individual donations are going into these groups. So it's more than government, it's more than terror. It seems like the ideology is really taking hold. Do you have any explanation of why? I'm really been wrestling with it. Why in the world would this be erupting worldwide at the same time?
Gordon, I do believe this is a coordinated effort. If you think back, for years we've seen these Al-Quds Day rallies that the Islamic Republic founded these Al-Quds Day rallies all across the world. And Al-Quds in Arabic means Jerusalem. So they would have these hate fests every year on the calendar that took place in European countries and sometimes in the U.S. as well, more lately. And so these have been organized now for years from the Islamic Republic. And I believe that once Hamas committed these atrocities against Israel, they were just set up and ready to go. So it is a coordinated effort. And I want to say, on the note of our young people on our college campuses and how they're exhibiting so much hatred towards Israel and the Jews, Gordon, if you think about that, these kids are being told by the left that Israel is a colonialist state, that Israel is committing genocide and apartheid. And these kids are hearing this every day and they're believing it. It would make sense that they're exhibiting this hatred and venom towards Israel. So it really is incumbent upon all of us now to be fighting this narrative, these lies and propaganda that are espoused not only by people like Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib in our U.S. Congress, but also, again, by the university faculty, the lecturers, the administration on these universities. We have a lot of work to do, and I am so grateful for the Christian community in the United States that has our own universities, alternative places for children to get, our kids to get educated. And so I think it's going to be a necessity for us to continue building alternatives to these institutions which have developed moral rot in them.
Well, 100,000 people turned out in Paris, and I just applaud that. I think that's absolutely wonderful. And tomorrow there is a pro-Israel march planned in D.C. So tell us, how important is it for us to stand up and show up to these, to have a public display in our support for Israel?
It's incredibly important, and thank you for raising it, Gordon. I'm going to be there myself. It's the March to Support Israel on the Mall in Washington, D.C. And again, I really hope that every single one of our Christian friends who can come out will come out to support Israel and the Jewish people in this great time of need that we have right now. As you know, Jewish people, the Jewish population in the United States is really quite small. And so as much support as we can get to show our leadership, to show our members of Congress, the Biden administration, and really the world over that Israel is not alone, that the Jewish people are not alone. And I think most importantly, that the silent majority would be speaking up and letting the world know that this is a war between good and evil. That is what we're facing right now. And it's time for all of us who stand with good to really speak up and be seen and be heard.
Well, Ellie, thanks for joining us. Thanks for that encouragement. And just know, we stand with you. We stand with Israel. We want to show up. And no matter what, we are going to stand with you.
Amen. Thank you so much, Gordon.
If you want to participate in the rally, it's real simple. You can go to cbnnews.com, find out more information. Again, it's tomorrow. We'll have even more on the show later to let you know that you can march for Israel. It's in Washington, D.C. Tomorrow, 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. We're going to be showing it live streamed on YouTube. So if you can't make it to D.C., you can participate online. But I encourage you to show up. That's going to what really makes the difference, and really will make a difference on Capitol Hill as people see how many people here in America support Israel. Well, as the fighting in Gaza intensifies, so do global protests. In London, Palestinian supporters continue to fill the streets. And then in Paris, we've already seen that 100,000 people took a stand against anti-Semitism. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl has the story.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu came against the idea of a ceasefire in Gaza until Israel completes its mission. Netanyahu was joined by War Cabinet Minister Benny Gantz and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant.
Hamas is under huge pressure. This pressure right now is increasing. They hear the tanks above the tunnels. They hear the bulldozers taking down the houses, and they know very well that they will get to them.
Gallant also warned Hezbollah. However, the next day, 21 Israelis were wounded in attacks on the northern border.
The citizens of Lebanon must know that if Hassan Nasrallah makes a mistake, the fate of Beirut could be like the fate of Gaza.
Inside Gaza, fighting intensified. At the same time, the IDF says it's talking with the heads of the hospitals there.
We opened designated routes from the hospitals in the northern Gaza Strip southbound. We are speaking with the hospital's management teams and are offering assistance to safely transport the sick and the wounded. Civilians of the northern Gaza Strip continue to answer the IDF calls and are moving southwards, despite Hamas doing everything in its power to make them stay.
In an interview with the BBC, Israeli President Isaac Herzog revealed that soldiers operating in northern Gaza found a copy of Hitler's Mein Kampf in Arabic on the body of a terrorist using a civilian home as a Hamas terror base.
It's the book that led to the Holocaust and the book that led to World War II. He even marked, he wrote notes, he marked and learned again and again Adolf Hitler's ideology of hating the Jews, of killing the Jews, of burning the Jews, of slaughtering the Jews. This is the real warrior act.
Demonstrations are taking place in Europe and the U.S. Some 300,000 pro-Palestinian protesters marched through the streets of London as Britain celebrated victory in World War I. In Paris, more than 100,000 people marched to protest anti-Semitism that has soared since the Hamas attacks on October 7th. On NBC's Meet the Press, Netanyahu challenged those who are supporting Hamas.
Those who protest for Hamas, you're protesting for sheer evil.
A huge march for Israel is planned at the National Mall in Washington on Tuesday. William Daroff of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations told CBN's Faith Nation they expect tens of thousands to turn out in support of Israel, the release of the hostages held in Gaza, and to stand against anti-Semitism.
We expect that there will be many, many Jews. There will be many, many of our allies, including in the Christian community, who will be joining us. And the focus of the march is to focus on support for Israel during its fight against the Hamas terrorist army. It is to march to combat anti-Semitism, the amazingly awful rise, the tsunami of anti-Semitic Jew hatred across America.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
If you want to stand for Israel, I encourage you to do it. The rabbis say in every generation a Haman comes who wants to destroy the Jewish people. Haman is from the book of Esther. He wanted to kill all of the Jews in the empire, and he was thwarted in that effort. And that famous line, for such a time as this. So it is our time, and our time to stand up and say, yes, we stand with Israel. The March for Israel is tomorrow afternoon from 1 to 3 p.m. in Washington, D.C. If you can make it, please be there to show your support. You can also watch live coverage of the march on our CBN YouTube page and the CBN News Channel or any of our CBN News platforms. Please get involved. Please stand for Israel today.